Thanks for coming along. Thanks for supporting. It's been an absolutely incredible few days. As if you listened to my webcast this morning, I talked about as well. First of all, the elections last week. I was nervous about standing so soon after we were registered, after the registration was complete. And I was nervous for the candidates. I didn't want us to get a wipeout or embarrassed in any way. I became more optimistic as we went along through the campaign because I saw the enthusiasm of the candidates and I saw that we were getting a really good response around the country. We stood just over a dozen seats. And to me, it was an opportunity to dip our toe in the water and sort of get ourselves out there, get thousands of leaflets out, which we did. I did not, in all honesty, expect us to do quite as well as we did. And among the race among the small parties, we beat in one seat or another all of the small parties, including the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, and of course UKIP. In the one place that we stood against UKIP, we got more votes, and we got more votes than the Greens twice, and twice we got more than the Liberal Democrats. Absolutely amazing result for such a new group. And we did it the old-fashioned way as well. And this is why I keep bleating on about the back to basics politics. We did that with leafleting. We did it with leafleting. The media, we got some media coverage, but it was all negative. But it's still, I'll have negative media coverage if that's all we'll get. But we did it online and with leafleting. And that's exactly how we're going to do it, full stop. That is exactly how we're going to do it, full stop. The media can't ignore us as we get bigger, which we will. And they will continue to demonise us and continue to smear and slander us. But luckily, about half the country thinks they're all liars and, well, biased is an understatement. So they're not having the impact they once had. And even if they did, we can still go around them with the internet and leafleting. And I've never been as excited about the future of this party as I was last Friday morning when those results started to come in. People will have to take us a lot more seriously now than they have. Onwards and upwards. From now, a priority for me, I've appointed you may have heard, but I'll just bring you up to date on everything that's going on in the party. We have appointed a chairman of the party, Ed de Molay, and ever since he took charge, it's freed up a lot of time for me, because I was having to dip in and sort of oversee things that I really shouldn't be part of my job. So we've finally got a chairman appointed, and so much has been achieved. And while it probably might not look like that from the outside at the moment, so much has been achieved. Priority now for me is to make joining easier. We have a lot of people who want to join, but find the sign-up process difficult. And I quite understand that. A lot of people who want to join, but because we only have a PayPal account at the moment, they are not keen on that either. So joining is going to be made a lot easier. I have about 10 of these meetings in my diary for the next 2 months. Did anyone bring a friend? Thank you. Is everyone else a member? Is everyone else a member? Wow, thank you. Thank you. Yes, okay. We'll try and win you over. I'd be interested to know what made you come along. But thank you all, obviously, for joining. Priorities are getting in place a regional structure. At the moment, we have a committee, which was appointed by myself at the very early stages of the party. We have, obviously, as I've said, now got a chairman. We are going to formalise the committee at the end of this month. I've made a lot of additions to it. And a deputy leader is going to be announced in the next couple of weeks. With that, one of the things that this committee needs to do now is get in place a regional structure, because at the moment the party is being run centralised, from a small group of us. We have to push that out. And I want regional structures in place. I want regional autonomy for branches. And we've got the members. We've got members all over the country. We've got about 4,000 people just waiting to be called on to set up branches, to get candidates in the local area, to give us local manifestos, and to get all of this ready for next May, wherever there's people sitting next May. I also want to go up to Scotland soon. I haven't been to Scotland at all. I have been to Scotland, but I haven't been to Scotland. Even in the UKIP leadership election, there was no meeting in Scotland. So I want to go up to Scotland very soon and start looking at the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Assembly and looking at them very seriously. I think they've got elections in the next couple of years as well, getting candidates in place for that. And it's really snowballing. It's snowballing. And one of the reasons for coming here tonight was to ask members to put yourself forward, either to think about being candidates or to put a branch together in this area and get some branch meetings going. And we want to put out leaflets. We're leafleting in London on Saturday. No elections, but we're leafleting in London on Saturday anyway, because I want people to get leaflets from us all year round. It's really effective. It's really effective. And there's a reason we've been doing it for eons. It's because it works. It's because it works. It's not as costly as you might think. It's not as costly as you might think. I mean, for the entire, in terms of leaflets, for the entire campaign we've just run, leaflets cost about £3,500 altogether. It's really not as expensive as you might think. And those are quite good quality leaflets that we had. I was quite pleased with them.
What was the print run on that for that price?
How many? I honestly don't know. I can find out for you, but I didn't do the ordering myself. But I do know it came to about 3,200 altogether, which is not bad. And when you consider the results that we got, it worked. So I want us leafleting all the time, all the time. We shouldn't be door knocking all the time. It's interesting. When you knock at doors, people's doors during election time, some people will say to you, "Well, how come we only ever hear from you at election time?" And my answer to that is always, how many times do you want me knocking on your door? do you want me knocking on your door all year round? And it's always, no, actually, I don't. Thank you. But yeah, we'll be leafleting all year round and attending every event that we can to get more leaflets out. Second thing that happened this weekend was Antwerp, where I gave out more leaflets. There were people from the UK there, and there are people with an interest in the UK there. I went there to speak at a book launch for a senator in Belgium, and it was a packed house. She's written a book called Politically Incorrect, and she's a senator, as I said, for the Vlaams Belang, I can never pronounce that party. And a fantastic turnout from all over Europe, young and old, black and white, people from various different countries, and all there to talk about the taboo issue, which is what they called, and what was called on the day, the Islamization of Europe. There is a growing movement against this. There is a growing movement against this across Europe. And as I've been saying for quite a while now, we need to ally and align ourselves with groups across Europe, because this is a Europe-wide issue. And one of the policy positions that For Britain has taken, and I think it's very wise of us to take it, because you can already see other people sort of moving in that direction as well, is that Brexit's not enough. Obviously, Brexit is what we want, but I don't think Brexit's going to solve the problems. And that's if we get Brexit at all. And I don't think we're going to get Brexit at all. I think they will fudge it and fudge it and fudge it. We may get Brexit in name, but one thing we won't get rid of is freedom of movement. That they will sneak in by hook or by crook. They will keep freedom of movement, or they will keep us arguing over freedom of movement for years and years to come. And nothing will change. In effect, nothing will change. A couple of big business relationships may change, trade deals may change, but for the people living in this country, very little will change. This is why politics needs to be brought back home a little bit, because it's always about big business. It's always about big trade. And I want to change how we talk about the European Union. People are not interested in trade deals. They may not be wise. I mean, the economy rests on trade. We understand this. But when it's the only thing politicians talk about, people begin to switch off. Now, I want people to understand that this is the immigration that the EU is facilitating, and this is not just, a standard sort of movement between countries that happens all the time. This is population shifts, massive population shifts from the Middle East and Africa, people who have nothing in common with us, nothing in common with our way of life, our culture, our way of thinking, educational standards, nothing. And yet we're having 1 million plus that we know of in a year, and that was Germany alone, coming to Europe. This is the European Union's fault overwhelmingly, not exclusively. The compliant national governments are also very happy to flood the countries with masses of immigrants from places that we simply have nothing in common with.
It's going to get worse when they allow Turkey into the EU.
Well, again, we were told it would never happen, weren't we?
Yes.
We were told it would never happen by the same Prime Minister who actually advocated for it. And thinks we don't notice. Thinks we don't notice these things. We do notice these things. But Brexit's not enough. And I think our message on Brexit is fresh and new and far more interesting and exciting than we must be free to make our own trade deals. Of course we must, but that's not what it's all about. And it actually just voting for Brexit was proof that the economy was not the only thing people cared about. It wasn't. And they gave an answer to this because the economy was all that was discussed leading up to Brexit as well. And we were all going to be starving in the streets if we voted to leave the EU. It didn't faze anyone, it didn't stop us. If we get the right messages out, we can get this party as the real Brexit party. And a real anti-EU party, because it's perhaps not enough to be just Brexit, but anti-EU, and to say that we can bring down the European Union, and we can, and that's what we want to do. And one of our candidates was the coverage that she got from the local press was just about that point. It was about the point that our policy is to get rid of the EU altogether. And it's new, and it's exciting, and it's brave, and it's a little bit bolshy, and it's so much clearer than trade deals with this country and that country. So much clearer.
I'm so glad you said that about bringing down the EU.
Yes,
That's
we
a
have to.
fantastic policy.
We have to. Bring it down.
So
Bring
would
it down.
you not want to start a deal at all with the EU?
It depends. It depends. Look, it's obviously in everyone's best interest. If we could keep tariff-free trade, it would obviously in everyone's best interest, including the European Union. But they're going to try and punish us. And they're going to try and punish us as a lesson to other countries that they are not to be defied.
So do you think that during the Vote Leave campaign that some of the people, because they said that the EU will be queuing up to be having trade deals with us, do you think that was not true?
The EU will be queuing up for trade deals with us.
Yes.
Well, they're not.
They're not.
They're going to make it. They're going to make it as difficult as possible.
But during the campaign, they said they would be. They would.
Yeah, but that's the way, it's because our government's dealt with it the wrong way. She's capitulated on everything and they just take another step further.
The EU wants nothing more than to punish us, but French and German manufacturing workers don't want to punish us, they want jobs.
They want to trade.
The way to play the game is to have hard Brexit, put up really steep tariffs, and to wait until the big German and French companies are screaming at their
It's certainly an option. It's certainly an option. And if we were willing to play hardball, we would say it's an option. But there isn't any hardball coming from us. And the problem is that the UK is acting like it has no power. It's acting like it has no power. Call their bluff once or twice. Instead of just conceding every time, call their bluff once or twice. But you've got to be brave. And you've got to actually want to get out as well. And I'm not convinced that either side of this debate actually wants to get out. Theresa May appointed a committee for this, and half of them were Remainers. Why? Why would you have a committee for Brexit when half of them remain? It's this sort of inclusive approach, isn't it? They lost, but we'll still include them in going forward. It's like the Tories winning a general election and giving half the cabinet to Labour. You don't do it. You won, you win.
The argument, the economic argument about Brexit, whether we stay, whether we go, or wherever else, that is quite. It's secondary to, if you look at the growth of the parties who are highlighting. If you look at AFD, if you look at the alternatives in Belgium and France and Italy, the Five Star Movement, we're probably going to have another election there in Italy in the next couple of weeks. This is not simply because of the economic argument within the EU.
Absolutely, it's because of the immigration.
This is all about the immigration and the black plague that's overwhelming the continent. And that's the message. So we can talk and let mainstream politicians talk about the economic advantages and disadvantages of Brexit until the cows come home. what you rightly said is we've got to get the message out there that it's more than just the economics, it's the social and political and economic infrastructure of Europe that's in danger here
Absolutely.
from an alien species.
And it's about what kind of Europe your children and grandchildren are going to be living in.
Yeah.
We need to make it understood that people have a responsibility now to understand that Europe in a couple of decades is very different from Europe 2 decades ago. It's not going to be free, it's not going to be safe, it's already not safe. We're getting examples of this all the time, and we're not being told every jihadi murder either. Now, I'm not a great conspiracy theorist, but I don't believe what I'm hearing. I don't believe what I'm hearing. A, we're not hearing them all. There are a lot of single murders, for example, we're not hearing about. And B, I don't know when mental illness became getting a van and driving it into people for no reason whatsoever. It seems very strange to me that all of a sudden mentally ill people have decided to, at an alarmingly increasing rate, get a van and drive it into people. I'm not buying it, I'm afraid. I'm not buying it. So we're not being told half of what's going on. There are people who have had their throats cut in broad daylight in public in Germany by someone shouting Allahu Akbar, and you'll only find it in the alternative news. So we have to drive this home. This will make us the anti-EU party if we focus on these things. Of course we talk about trade, and by the way, we've got someone really exciting. I won't tell you who it is now, but I will hopefully be able to tell you soon. Really exciting to write the economic policy for the party. It is someone who is widely known and respected as an economist, an economic genius, in fact. And he's going to write the economic policy for us. So we are going to have a solid, strong taxation economic policy, but we cannot talk only about this. We have to have a bright, fresh, tough new message about the European Union, because I'm sorry to say, and every time I say this, someone will accuse me of sour grapes. It's nothing to do with sour grapes. The UKIP is not the party to take Brexit forward. It's not. It's not. And in the public's mind, UKIP did its job. And that's why the vote collapsed after Brexit. That's why the vote collapsed. And the problem that UKIP has got now, and again, I'm not going to talk for long about UKIP, but the problem that it's got now is that the only thing they all had in common was they wanted out of the European Union. And now that the public sees them as having achieved that, they can't figure out who they are because they don't agree on anything else. And this is where the big divide on Islam came.
They haven't done for, to be honest, since the inception of the party, because I was in the party and my parents were before that since '93, I think. And every 2 years there's a massive argument, a massive split, a load of people leave, and then it all happens again, and there's just too much toxicity now. It's just
and it was pretty much split down the middle on the Islam question as well. And you can't bring a party forward that is half and half on one of the key issues of the day. It can't go forward.
I'd just like to raise one point, because people might not have seen it. There was an academic study released at the weekend which says that by 2021-22 the demographics in the country would change in favour of a Brexit vote. I did tweet it, it's on my timeline, so if anybody wants to know exactly where that came from, it's there on my timeline. But that's the way they're actually playing the game. They're getting everybody into the idea that we're going to be 2021, 2022 voting ourselves back in.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what they can do. They can campaign for us to go back in after we've left. That's what they keep saying. Democracy didn't stop after, but no, it didn't. But democracy is not ignoring the result and continuing to campaign, and then ignoring the next result, and then continuing to campaign and ignoring the next result. You have to actually implement the decision in order for democracy to work. That's the whole point of it. There's no point in campaigning for something if it never gets implemented. So yes, democracy continues, but they can continue to campaign for us to go back into the European Union, but only after we've left. Only after we've left. And I wish them luck getting a government to try and bring us back in after we've left.
Years and years to apply, doesn't it?
It's but that's it. That's the answer. We can't just keep ignoring results. That's not how democracy works. And it would be the equivalent of if Labour won a general election, not allowing them into government because some other people voted for the Tories, so it's not fair. We'll have to either give, as I said, half the cabinet to the other party, or just keep voting and voting endlessly for no good reason. It doesn't make any sense. It's an excuse. I mean, these are people who actually don't like democracy very much. You can see it. There was an article in The Guardian, I know The Guardian, but last week about how democracy is going wrong. It led to Brexit, it led to Trump. Democracy is going terribly wrong. And this is how they say it. This is how they say it. They simply cannot fathom that anyone who doesn't agree with them should be in power. They can't fathom it.
It's populism, don't they? It's almost as if we're extreme. What we've done is we've woken up and we've realised that we've been sold a pup. I honestly believe, Anne-Marie, that in the next decade, the EU as it stands at present will not exist.
I agree.
The fault lines are there. We created the fissure when we voted 12 months ago to leave. And what we're seeing now is other parties and the general populace within Germany itself, France, Belgium, Italy, Greece, Portugal, Spain, all of these countries now, we're seeing movements like For Britain.
The beast is waking up in Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. Even Sweden, for heaven's sake, look at the carnage there. And we're now seeing an alternative for Sweden type party coming to the fore there.
The Sweden Democrats.
Absolutely.
They are, as far as I'm aware, I spoke to a lady from Sweden at the event in Antwerp. They're polling number one. Now, whether that poll comes to fruition at election time is another matter.
Yeah.
But they're polling number one, even in Sweden, as you say, even Sweden. It's no keeping this. There's no holding this back now. It's the genie is out of the bottle now, and there's no going back from this. And I think, and I believe that we will be the UK's equivalent of AFD, and not necessarily in terms of belief or in agreeing on every policy, but in terms of being the one to break through the politically correct barrier. Will be for Britain. I do believe that.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, I'm Damien, Solartech Damien on the group, by the way, if anyone is on the group. You've mentioned about talking to other groups in Europe, and I've been aware of Alternative for Deutschland and Alternative for Austria, and so this Alternative for your country seems to be a popular name. And you're speaking to these groups. Is there scope for an Alternative for Europe, where we all band together under Alternative for Britain, Alternative for Deutschland, Alternative for France, Alternative for Italy, under an Alternative for Europe brand with similar policies?
Well, to be a political party.
No, like
I think our only options would be to stand for the European Parliament.
No, why not? We stand for the European Parliament anyway, but if it still exists.
Well, I don't think we are standing for the European Parliament again, are we?
What I mean is that if we all have similar policies, that kind of thing would have massive.
I think there's certainly scope for an informal alignment.
Oh yeah, no legal basis.
I think there's certainly scope for an informal alignment.
Issue, if you look at it from the Islamic evangelist point of view, and I've done a lot of work in the Middle East, and the guy says, if they won't accept our evangelism, we'll fight them. And that's what the guys tell me personally, so we're up against that. Isn't the best thing for them to have Europe divided?
Best thing for
the Islamic evangelists?
We are divided. We are divided, and we're unstable.
We're
unstable.
AFD.
No, absolutely. I'm fully. I just don't think we should formally align, because then you find yourself being responsible for something somebody in Poland did. That's the problem. You can keep loose alliances, but you'll find yourself. If you have too formal an alliance, you'll find yourself having to answer for some comment made by somebody in Poland which you have no responsibility over. You have to be careful to keep your brand. You also have to be careful to keep your brand British. We're still trying to appeal to British people. But I absolutely would, an informal alignment of that name might be quite interesting.
And using the alternative, I mean, I know we've spent a long time getting the name, but if we were actually Alternative for Britain, then anyone who's aware of Alternative for Deutschland, they would instantly recognise it.
I know.
Smart one.
The problem that brings up is that you're also, again, going to be held responsible for something that Alternative for Deutschland does.
There's also the connotation, Anne-Marie, of the word alternative. As soon as you give something
Yeah,
the word alternative, they say, what are the other choices?
Absolutely,
Whereas just
absolutely.
for Britain, that's what it says.
That's a really,
It's
really
standing
good
for
point,
Britain.
actually. I've wondered what it was about the world alternative
Yeah.
that bothers me. That's
And
it.
I think
It makes you sound like an outsider from the beginning.
I think
I see it as kicking the status quo.
That's
Yeah,
okay
there's
for
always
a
the other
movement,
Yeah.
for a
what you're saying has got merit.
But once you're there,
what I
you
would
need
like
to
to
drop
see, and because we are all coming from the same, we're all arguing the same, we're making the same case. It's about the Islamification, it's about the social damage it's causing, the economic damage, the infrastructure, everything, the cultural damage, the loss of our cultures, whether it's Germany, France, Britain, or wherever else. What I think would be interesting, I'm not advocating adding to your workload in any way.
You can try.
There's not enough hours in a day or days in a week or once
I have
in a year.
36 hours in
But-
my day.
Absolutely. But to have cross-fertilisation where when we have a meeting or we have a rally or something, that we have someone from AFD come and speak, where we have someone from the Belgian equivalent come to speak, where someone from For Britain goes to speak, so that we are putting the message across in a Europe-wide perspective and saying this isn't something that's limited to just Britain and the far right in Britain. This is something that is affecting the whole of Europe.
My second idea was we go to campaign for them in Deutschland and they come to campaign for us in Britain. And putting leaflets in the door.
Never think about that one. But we're going to have a conference in September, our first national conference, at the same time as everyone else in conference season. And I have already invited someone from Geert Wilders' party to come and speak. I will invite Mr. Wilders himself. We'll see. The last time I invited him to Britain, he said yes. He wasn't quite as big and famous as he is now. I was busy, I suspect. But I will invite him. I'll also be inviting Marine Le Pen. And I will invite, I can't promise you they'll come, but I will be inviting them. And I'll invite several other figures from key parties across Europe to come and speak. So I've already got plans to do that. But keep an eye out for that. That's going to be mammoth to organise, but we're absolutely determined to make that one happen. One second.
I believe you know these people called Generation Identity, or have met them.
Yeah. I've met a couple of individuals. Yeah.
Tell me what you think of them, because they invited two very key people from Hungary and from Austria, and they were stopped at Heathrow and sent back. They weren't allowed in.
Geert Wilders is not allowed in either.
I know he is.
Well, he has been stopped, but he sued and he won. Because he did eventually get to speak in the House of Lords with Baroness Cox and Lord Pearson. It was quite a few years ago now. And of course there were protesters outside calling for him to be killed, openly threatening to kill him. And the police, of course, did absolutely nothing about any of it. I mean, this was a visiting MP from a friendly European nation being threatened with death on the streets of London. And the police did absolutely nothing about it. But anyway, that's coming in September. And last thing for the weekend, I'm sure some of you were at it, the Day for Freedom on Sunday in London. What an amazing day. The crowd was absolutely electrifying. When I stood up and said, wow, I meant it just came out. It wasn't, it was electrifying. It was an incredible day. It was a privilege to be a part of it. And I've been questioned on why I didn't mention the party in my speech, and I'll address that now. It's a judgment call for me, and you have to sometimes decide when to do things and when not to do things. And we were told we were given 5 minutes, and I like to stick to the time we're given for the sake of the audience. And I thought I did weigh up, shall I promote the party or not? And I decided not, because there were lots of people there on Sunday, a lot of speakers there on Sunday, a lot of whom have very different opinions from each other. But we were all there to defend each other's right to express those opinions. And I don't like some of what the people on that stage say, and I'm sure they don't like some of what I say. The point was that I was there to defend their right to say things I don't like, and hopefully they were there to defend my right to say things I don't like. So I thought this is a time to put all differences aside and stick to freedom of speech. So I elected not to plug the party on the stage. However, Having said all that, thousands of leaflets were being distributed in the audience in front, and the banners and the flags were flying. So we were promoted. I just thought it best, in the spirit of the event, not to do it on stage. So I hope everyone's all right with that. I know some people disagree. I've had a few complaints about that, but there we go. So yeah, fantastic few days. I had a day off yesterday, spent it in the sun with my dogs, which is fantastic.
Quite right.
And today we're back on track. This week I'm obviously here today, and I'm going to stop in a minute because clearly we want to have a conversation, and I prefer it when we have a conversation. But this week I'm down in Newton Abbot on Thursday night and leafleting in London on Saturday. And then I think we've got, where are we the following week? Anyway, lots and lots and lots of meetings to do. Take a little bit of a breather before our committee meeting on the 20th, and I will announce to everyone who the committee is. I know some of them are on the website, some are not. There is, of course, still the issue with anonymity among people on the committee. A lot of people are too afraid to say, but I don't particularly. I'm supportive of them, but I wish we weren't in that position. I think members have complained to me about wanting to know who is on the committee, and I think they've got a point. But I've also got to think about people's own feelings in all of this. So it's a difficult one. But we're having a meeting on the 20th of May, and everything. It's going to be a mammoth meeting. We will tell you exactly, I hope, exactly where we'll be going region-wise after that meeting. And one of the things I wanted to appeal to you was to get, if you can, to get involved and get something, maybe a Kent branch going, and find out for us where the better seats might be and the better areas to target, and get campaign days where various people can come and help. I'd like to see teams and teams of us all year round going out and leafleting. I think that's how we're going to do it, and we don't need to rely on a corrupt media to do so. I know I haven't talked for very long. What time are we on now? 20 past there. Okay, we've got about an hour. I think we can have questions if you want. If you're not, if you want, I can go on. I can go on and on for ages, as you probably know. But I get a feeling, because of all the questions and all this sort of bubbling, that you'd rather just have a chat. I'm very happy to do that. So I can see your hand going up.
Yes. So I've heard you talk about stopping immigration from Muslim countries, and I think that's the right thing to do. But the thing is, if you look at countries like, when Donald Trump did that in America, he couldn't just say we have to stop all Muslims. He had to make it. What I'm saying is that I think it'd be difficult to say we can't. How will we enforce it? I think the best thing to do would be to not accept passports from people from Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or any of these other places. We can't, because there's no way to know what religion you are if you're a traveller and things like that. I mean, do we take people and question them and force it out of them? And even so, you've got to contend with, taqiyya and stuff like that. So that's kind of my question, how would you enforce that kind of?
No, it's very, very difficult. And one of the things that people bring up is ending Muslim immigration. Well, then you have the issue of Muslims from where? You could be talking about Muslims born in Germany or Muslims born in France. My own thinking on it would be that you would have to cut off certain countries and simply not have immigration in an immigration service to people from that country.
So end visa programs.
So Pakistan, for example, I don't think we should have any more immigration from Pakistan. What is the process now for people immigrating from Pakistan? Whatever it is, stop it.
I think that the problem is not so much immigration, because you mentioned the problem of stopping immigration, but when they come here, they try and evangelize, they try and build mosques, and they get planning permission from mosques. Now, the difference between a mosque and a church, if things go against the church, it can be deconsecrated. A mosque can never be deconsecrated. So they're taking over authority from the civil authorities. So there are all these sort of things that make life comfortable for them. Mm-hmm. And this is what we shouldn't be doing.
We shouldn't, but the whole thing starts with immigration. the core,
Yeah,
the key, the starting point is immigration,
Yeah.
because you're not going to have all the problems with the mosques and the Sharia councils and the FGM and the child marriage and all the other horrible things it brings, and the religious intimidation and blasphemy violence. And none of that, you will have none of it if you don't have the immigration in the first
But
place.
surely you should
So the
attack
immigration
those
has, you have to stop the immigration first. Because we have to deal with the people who are already here, and we have to have policies for people who are already here. But none of that, that's not workable if the door is still open. If the door has to close first. The door has to close
Make
first.
up their own mind. If this isn't a nice place to come to, they won't come here.
Well, let's make it slightly less nice then.
Yeah, that's what I'm advocating.
Yes, but we have to stop the immigration as well. We talked about. I'm stunned that the new Home Secretary, within a few hours of taking his post, went back on Theresa May's making it a hostile environment for illegal immigrants. Now, all that means is making it difficult to be an illegal immigrant. It should be difficult to be an illegal immigrant. You've broken the law, you're in the country illegally. And the idea that it should be a doddle, that you should basically have all the rights and abilities that someone who did everything by the book and came here illegally and all the rest of it, you have the same abilities as them. No, it's an invite to break the law. And our senior ministers, Boris Johnson and Sajid Javid, both have encouraged immigrants to break British law. Yeah. These are two of the most senior ministers in the country, and both have in the last few weeks encouraged people to break British migration law. This is scandalous. This is scandalous.
One of the things that shocks me, who was the mayor of London? Was it Sajid Javid?
No, that's Sadiq Khan.
Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan, I've got it wrong.
Sajid Javid is the new Home Secretary.
Yeah. Sadiq, one of the first things that he said when he got to office, he's going to make it easy to attract talent into London. Now, the first thing we know that it doesn't take talent to work in the city. It takes connections, okay, and greed. That's all you need, connections and greed. And the Spitalfields experiment proved it. Spitalfields is where the Olympic Games were held, if you ever did the two of that. Where's he going to get his friends from to bring into the city?
Well, no, it's another signal to immigration.
Exactly.
That's what it's all about. It's not about bringing in talent. It's about keeping the borders open. This is key to such leftist politicians, and it's key to the likes of Sajid Javid, who made it very clear in his first few hours that yes, if you come to Britain illegally, it'll be fine. Invite to the world.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go to you. Can I come back to you?
All their benefits. Then they won't come. Won't give them free, don't give them housing, don't give them benefits.
Again, the key is closing the door in the first place. And part of the reason, I agree the benefits need to change. We need to do something about the polygamous marriages.
Absolutely.
And one thing we can do about that is to make sure mosques register for civil marriage, just like every other religious organisations. Islam is the only religion in this country which doesn't have the vast majority of its establishments registered for marriage. And there's a reason for that. They don't want to marry under English civil law because they want to marry under Sharia, because they want to have 3 or 4 wives and they want to have 25 children and bring them all up on benefits. Yes. That has to stop. Child benefit for two children only. And we can judge that by both parents. So it's 2 children per father as well as 2 children per mother. So if he has 3 or 4 wives and 4 or 5 children, he's only getting benefits for 2 of those children. Even if he has 20, he's getting benefits for 2. That we can do. But again, part of the problem, if there is no basic benefit, and this is why I go back to saying immigration itself is the core issue. If there's no basic benefit, imagine the crime. Imagine the crime. Imagine the theft levels. Imagine the violent crime by desperate people. These people shouldn't be here in the first place, quite frankly. And that's absolutely key. The immigration has to stop.
Like they left Austria.
What's that?
Won't they leave like they left Austria? They left Austria apparently when all their benefits were cut. If we cut the benefits, won't they leave?
I'm not against the idea. I can promise you that. I'm not against the idea. But there are a lot of people who are already here, either here legally or with children born here, who are going to be very difficult to deport. And I understand you're going to have to change major legal, even major laws to deport. But we do have to change laws. We can change criminal law, for example, and introduce deportation as a punishment. That needs to happen. That needs to happen. And the FGM Act, for example, which shouldn't exist in the first place, it should have been grievous bodily harm from day one. By having FGM legislation, we gave it a veneer of cultural protection. We should have. The French did it that way. The French treated it as grievous bodily harm from day one, and they've jailed over 100 people for FGM in France. We've jailed nobody. But there has to be, if we have an FGM Act, then put in it that deportation for those who are practicing it. It has to happen. It has to happen. Sorry, I'll come to you in 1 minute.
In Wales, which is almost legitimising the practice.
I know. There are eight in London alone. There are 8 FGM clinics in London alone. And people keep telling me, but they're not there to perform FGM, they're there to fix FGM. Well, thank you, I know. But the very fact that we have clinics opening to fix FGM is not a good sign for our society. It's not a good sign for the direction we're going in. And Labour, Welsh Assembly, Labour, putting out tweets saying she was very pleased to attend an FGM clinic. Very pleased to attend. They haven't a clue. She deleted it. She deleted it after a barrage of shame on you. But that is how clueless they are.
Policies, what about housing, employment? You know, you've got millions and millions of people being robbed by employment agencies. You know, what about the bread and butter issues? We all know about Islam. I think we're going to get bogged down with Islam. But what about all the stuff that's actually going to put you into number 10?
Well, have you read the 10-point plan?
I have, yes.
Yeah.
It's basically, do you believe in council houses?
This is something that I want the party to decide on. I have a 10, and I know I've been talking about this for a while, but the election is over now, and this is what I'll be doing next. I want to offer 2 policies on various different areas for members to vote on, and that is one of them. That is one of them. Do we want to rebuy? Do we want an emphasis on social housing?
You can't look into prefabs. I'm so sorry. Prefabs are not what they used to be. There was a fantastic article in one of the, I think it was, Telegraph, and there's this Australian company. I think we're buying into that. And my goodness me, when I looked at these images of these prefabs, they were luxury. And they were a fraction. I mean, is there?
We do need to have my own view on housing is that we need to look at real alternatives like that. Like that. What is key is that it's affordable. Is that it's affordable. How it's done, I personally would like to see much greater investment into local government anyway. Much greater investment for housing and many other things. We could use, if we get rid of a lot of the waste of national government, we can invest greatly into local government. And I personally would like to see us invest in perhaps part private, part socially owned housing, so that it becomes affordable and it doesn't have every penny having to be trumped up by the local council. There are ways of doing this. But what's priority is we have to prioritise local people for social housing, whether it be social, part private, part social, whatever way. We need to build, but we need to build for local people. And I want to see planning being elected. I want to see major planning proposals by local government, elected by local people. This is absolutely key. People have no say. You will often see small high streets destroyed by massive shopping centres going into areas they really oughtn't to be in. I see a massive upheaval. Now, I'm a little bit old-fashioned on this, and I may be out of tune. This is why the party is going to decide. I'll also ask about nationalisation of the railways. Some people keep bringing it up. Some people have this view that we should go down the rather more socialist route, and others have a view that we should go down the more free market route. My own view is to find an alternative between the two, take the best of the two, and see what we can come up with priority-wise. But it's difficult to give a detailed policy on local housing until you know what that local area needs, what its resources are, and what possible investment, private investment you can get in order to not break the local council and to keep houses affordable. It's difficult to give details on that because you don't know, it's specific to each area. But fundamentally, I want a few things: affordable housing, housing so that people have somewhere to live and to move out of their parents. But we also have to reduce demand, and that's a national government issue. These are very complicated issues and very difficult to give detailed manifesto promises on. But our priority is affordable. It must be affordable, prioritised for local people, and for major planning proposals, local people should have a say so that they can keep the character of their area in place. But underlining all of that is demand, and the demand is coming by the immigration crisis.
But we've got millions and millions of people on £8 an hour. Nothing is going to be affordable.
Again, it's because of oversupply. It's an oversupply of labour and undersupply of housing. You need to bring stability. You need to bring stability. The reason the employment market is as bad as it is, and the government twists and massages statistics. Nothing unusual, of course, for a government to massage statistics, but they are with what they tell us is higher rising employment rates is actually rising no hours contracts, 0 hours contracts, and various other part-time jobs, which are barely keeping people above water. So these statistics are not right, are not what we think. And I want to see people in solid employment, solid, safe employment. But we have to. The reason they get away with such bad employment practices, especially the big businesses, two reasons actually, because we're living under a corporate domination, and also because we're allowed, and we have allowed for decades, a massive oversupply of unskilled labour. And that is why they're getting away with treating employees as badly as they are. I want us to resolve these, but the underlying issue is immigration. It's immigration. No matter what issue comes up, it's still underlined by immigration.
The solution was what we did after the war. We built loads of prefabs. I lived in a prefab, all right. We built loads of prefabs and we built loads of...
I'm in favour of building. I'm in favour of building.
And we did it.
I'm in favour of building. I'm in favour of building. But when you have a city the size of Coventry added to your population every year, how can you possibly plan enough housing for those people?
That stuff. But what I'm saying is it's all them bread and butter issues as well that will put you into number 10.
I realise that. I talk about, listen, if you're telling me I only talk about Islam, it's simply not true. It's simply not true. In fact, I rarely mention Islam. And when I open up to questions, you know the first thing that people mention to me? Islam. Each and every time. So if you read our policies and you watch my videos, you'll know I don't always talk about Islam. It's simply not true. It's simply not true. It's simply not true. But immigration is key. It's absolutely key. Of course we need to build. But how can you build when you're adding a city the size of Coventry to your population every year? How can you possibly plan for it? And you can't plan it without knowing the specific requirements of that local catchment area, because you don't know what the migrant numbers are going to be in that area. For example, most immigrants would come in to London, certainly initially. So London boroughs have a different requirement to somewhere up in Cumbria, for example.
Next election, the Labour Party are going to stand up, they're going to say, we're going to build millions of council houses, and everybody that hasn't got a house or they're living in some attic room somewhere, they've got to go, that's great.
Yeah. And they'll be lying. And they'll be lying. But we must build. But here's the thing, I'm going to agree that we need to build houses, but unlike Labour, I will inject a bit of realism into this and say, how are you going to open the borders, Labour, and continue to build social housing for everyone? The result of that is that people believe me, because I'm being more realistic, and I'm telling them that we can't work miracles. We need specific policies for specific areas, and we need to inject a bit of realism into this. A bit of realism. We're going to have to look at, again, specific financing. Depending on the area. It all depends on the area and what kind of financing we do. I will agree with Jeremy Corbyn. Yes, we need to build. We have a housing crisis in this country, but unlike Jeremy Corbyn, I will admit what that problem is. And the problem is that we are adding a city the size of Coventry to this country every year, and it's unsustainable. And with that, he can promise all the council houses in the world. With that, I win that argument, because the public out there knows that he cannot possibly sustain building houses for an unlimited population.
My question is related to policies as well, general policies. I'm pleased to see that the discussions we're having on the Facebook group seem to have made it into the policies that we have so far. But is there going to be a process whereby we can contribute to the formulation of policies, not just at conference, but before we get to conference?
we'll have to, there's a thin line. It's a very difficult balancing act for us. Because if we take in policy proposals from everyone, we'll simply never get it done. Admin-wise, it's simply too difficult. What I think it is easiest and more time efficient for us to do, I still want members to have a say, but we can't offer out to bring in, just let me finish, we can't offer out to bring in everyone's thoughts into a manifesto. A, people won't agree with each other, and B, it would just be, the admin would be crazy. The only option we've really got realistically is to give two different proposals, encompassing a wide range of things, but two different proposals for you to pick one. It's the only way we can do it. It's the only way we can include you without getting bogged down in admin and it never getting finished. It's one of the things we have to do. You have to lead sometimes. You have to lead.
You could also ask for consultation on specific subjects.
Again, if you ask for consultation, you're going to get hundreds of replies, and then people will get upset if they're not included in it. It's a massive admin issue. We have to lead. We have to know the limits of the admin that we can carry out. We have to be realistic, but we also want to ask the members. There is a way we can find a middle ground in that, and that is to give options for you to vote on, and that vote will be carried.
Just to carry on with this example, I put a poll on the Facebook group about various methods of dealing with the problem. And there was a clear favourite, which was deportation of immigrants who commit a crime. So that's a mechanism, by putting different ideas up in a poll, that's a mechanism by which the membership can get involved in initially.
There are members' ideas that are on the manifesto. There are members' ideas, but we can't, from an admin perspective, and I need you to understand this, I really do. We can't, from an admin perspective, ask everyone and tell everyone that we can include every idea they have in a manifesto. We simply can't do it. Nor can we consult endlessly. We will build a manifesto out of the votes that you have. We will issue it to you. It's still going to, I called it an organic document the other day, and I do want it to be an organic document. But people need to understand the admin behind all this, and we simply can't include everyone's idea in it. We will get vast disagreement, and we will be bogged down in admin, and we need to get a manifesto together. It's the only way we can do it.
Is it usually at a conference that a manifesto is decided, though?
Well, we're going to ask you beforehand, because we want to issue the manifesto in September with everyone's decided votes on it. Another issue I want people to vote on is the House of Lords. What shall we campaign on the House of Lords with? What shall we campaign? I don't know if you see our video I did on this recently, where I said I have mixed feelings about the House of Lords. I do have mixed feelings about the House of Lords because I have experience with the House of Lords, and they're very good at dealing with controversial issues that the House of Commons won't touch. But I think the members will decide that we should campaign to abolish it. That's my suspicion. Some people have suggested abolish it and replace it with an English Parliament. I don't know how people feel about it. I'm not crazy about the idea. I don't know how people feel about that. But other issues like, shall we campaign for a UK constitution? I will be speaking in favour of that, and we will get branches going. I'll be asking branches to debate these, and I will go to meetings where I'm invited, and I'll give my side. But my vote is worth no more than anyone else's. But I will campaign for people to vote for a UK constitution. I think it's time. It's time to get rid of the Bill of Rights, or not the Bill of Rights, the Human Rights Act. It absolutely has to go. And we need a US-style constitution that transient MPs can't come into Parliament and take away our fundamental rights. This constitution will prevent them from doing it. That's something that I will be urging people to vote on and to change. Hi.
Actually, this encapsulates all of this, and what I was going
Sorry, hold on. I'm just going to let this woman speak. Sorry. I'll come back to you.
Sorry, that's okay. Anne-Marie, you said earlier on something about some of the members wanting or feeling they need to remain anonymous at the moment.
Yeah.
And whilst that's a bit of a situation I find myself in, otherwise I put myself forward, I think you should put yourself forward.
I'm hoping you will.
I'm sort of got a teenage son, I'm helping with a particular school. I voted Brexit. Once everybody, and I'm talking about every single teacher that I come across in that school, I was then known as the racist. But I thought you were such a nice lady. My son was targeted. That's just Brexit. So whilst I've said to Tom, I'm in the Swale area, I'm happy to print thousands of your leaflets at cost, and we will literally infiltrate Swale. That's Sittingbourne, Faversham, Medway. That's all I can do for the next 2 years.
That sounds good to me.
The only thing is, I, you know, a couple of people I've spoken to, and I was horrified because they thought, oh my God, that's that extremely racist group, Britain First. They're confusing the two. And I thought, good God, leaflet drop, we need we need planes to drop them.
God, I would love that. I would love that. I want billboards all along the M1.
And yet this is Brexit country. This is Brexit area, isn't it? I think Kent is pretty high.
It may be Brexit area, but schools are a little world of their own. And this brings me on to education, which is what part of our 10-point priority plan is to take the hard left out of education. And we can start is to defang the National Union of Teachers.
Yes.
Who are these people, and where did they get all this supposed authority from? I say this all the time, and I'll say it again because it always shocks people. When Theresa May, of all people, I mean Theresa May getting tough, and they're still outraged by it. Wanted us to teach British values to children. The NUT in its national conference voted no. We're not going to teach British values to children because it's a mark of imperialism. And instead, we're going to teach international values. Yes. So they're going to teach nothing because there's no such thing as international values. To them, international values translates into anti-British propaganda, anti-democracy propaganda. They are essentially communists. They are essentially communists who want to criminalise and ban any opposition and any dissidents, and they have taken over the schooling system. They have taken it over. They absolutely dominate it. This is key. This is key. If we want this country to exist as Britain in 40 years' time, we have to get into the schools now. We have to get into the schools now and change this because they are breeding. And also, I had a really interesting conversation on Sunday with a student journalist. I say he was about 20. And he asked me about political views being expressed which cause emotional anguish to other people. And the issue he raised was gay marriage. And he'd said, but people who speak in opposition to gay marriage, they might hurt the feelings of a gay person. And what struck me about him is he just could not fathom that it doesn't matter if someone's feelings are hurt. It matters that someone is able to speak publicly and express their opinion. And if your feelings are hurt, well, that's just too bad. I mean, this is actually the words I used to him. It's just too bad. You're just going to have to toughen up a little bit. He could not fathom what I was saying to him. It was like I was speaking another language. But you mean I should just accept hurt feelings? Yes, you should just accept hurt feelings. And stop trying to get everyone to approve of you. Get on with your life. Make sure your rights are intact. If anyone's trying to take away your fundamental civil rights, yes, fight them. But if they disapprove of you, they have every right to. Go away and get on with your life and stop worrying about it. But they don't get this. But this is what's coming up. This is what's coming up. And this is also, and universities absolutely swimming in political correctness. And there's a reason why you have to go to university now to join the police and a university to be a nurse in the NHS, because they are injecting university indoctrinated people into the health service and into the police, and there's no coincidence about any of it. Absolutely.
Are we going to do something about common purpose?
Common purpose I'm asked about a lot. This is a very sinister thing. I would like to see, essentially an audit of chief constables, of chief executives of local government, of chief executives of NHS hospitals, because believe me, that's common purpose as well. They are the ones who want NHS hospitals open to the whole world. There is a mechanism in place in the NHS to take in money as payment for treatment, and they don't want to do it.
No.
They don't want to do it. One, because there's laziness involved and it's too much work. And two, because they believe that the NHS should be there for the whole world. And you're talking about people, we're talking about senior people who get paid often 6 figures and to do an ineffective job, which an awful lot of them do, and still take home their 6 figures. But they want this. This is common purpose is dominating the NHS as well. I want to know exactly who has been through common purpose training across the public sector. It's senior figures. It would be another admin nightmare to find everybody. But let's make a list of what kind of roles we want examined. So it would be chief constables or chief executives of councils. We want to know whether or not they've been through common purpose. And we want the public to know this. And then I think a rather robust examination of their career and a rather robust examination of their beliefs. Because I'll tell you, people who believe, who are anti-mass immigration, their beliefs are heavily scrutinised, no matter what level of employment they're at. If that's the case, then I want the chief executives, their beliefs. And let's turn it around a little bit and have a look at what their beliefs are and have a look at how they're injecting their personal politics into the public sector to be paid for by the public. Just exposing these people. Make a massive, massive national issue out of it and watch it change. No one in politics talks about common purpose. We will. I
believe that those people that you mentioned, Anne-Marie, chief constables, police commissioners and everything else, they should be standing alongside the mayoral candidate or chief executive of the local authority should be standing for election and putting themselves up and singing their song and telling us exactly who they are and what the background is, having that forensic examination rather than being appointed by someone. I mean, Cressida Dick should not be in the position that she's in. Absolutely not. How many people realise that she was a gold commander during the 2007 London bombings and is the individual responsible for giving the order for the illegal killing of Jean-Charles Menendez?
The people have forgotten that, haven't they?
Yes, absolutely, because it's 2007, it's 11 years ago. Yeah. She was an absolute liability then, and she still is now, and this is all a direct result of common purpose. I think that what you're saying is merit. When people are going to be elected as your police commissioner or whatever else, it shouldn't be a political appointment, it should be the people that decide whether that's the ideal person to represent.
I agree. I partly agree. Once again, I have some concerns about that, and I'd think rather find a middle road to it. It's priority to me, priority policy that local people in power, whether it be in charge of the police station or the hospital, should be held accountable to the public. My hesitance about, and this is another thing that's going to be voted on, and I suspect the party will vote against me on this one as well. My hesitance about having elected chief constables or police commissioners is that it will then become all about politics. And politics tends to inject certain elements into things that can make it quite difficult. You'll have, in America, for example, it happens around election time that judges will up their sentencing to try and look tougher. And you can end up with miscarriages of justice, and you can even end up with people going away who shouldn't be going away. What I would personally prefer, but as I say, I think the party will go along with you and campaign to elect these people. I would prefer to have a committee of some sort, and I know it sounds bureaucratic again, but things have to be done, made up of local activists, so people involved in local charities, for example, people with an active role in their local community, to have a board which analyses, which is reported to by this chief constable, say, and they have the power not only to keep a close eye on what they're doing, but the power to sack them. It has to have teeth. I think that the police, for example, in Rotherham and Rochdale and elsewhere, the local people should have had the ability to sack all of them, and take their pensions away. That's what I want to say.
Yeah.
But I see problems with electing everybody. We would have elections all the time. The turnout would be really low. But I think rather that give people the ability to get rid of them, and that way you sort of send the message from the people up. And then you reclaim that power without getting bogged down in endless elections. I know there are difficulties with having constant elections.
The general public having the power to recall their MP and deselect them rather than that being down to the party. The reason I ask that is that Harridan Anna Soubry has to go.
She is dreadful.
Isn't she just?
She's one of the worst.
Yeah, I think she's
And
not alone.
that's a
There are
lot.
a number of them, and I honestly believe that the local population, the people that voted her in, if they've been sold a pup, they should be allowed to bring her back in and say, you no longer represent us, stand down, rather than having to rely on a political party, in this case Conservatives, who are so desperate for votes that they will let her get away with what she's getting away with. So I think that the argument of having a UK constitution, the Magna Carta was fine. We've lived for the past 2,000 years, and we've worked in common law and adapted it as the years go by, but it's not fit for purpose. The Germans have hidden behind the German constitution since 1945. The Americans have been robust as a result of the American constitution. Where's ours? So I'm all for that. I think that's something that we should push as well, is the installation or the implementation of a UK written constitution that protects not only our citizens but our country from other countries as well.
Yeah.
I
I completely
like the
agree.
committee idea. I think it's very good. I was thinking about the committee in the court actually, higher than the judge, to overrule the judge. In fact, but you're right. Maybe we just need a committee looking at what the judges are doing.
Yeah, I think the law. I think in terms of judges, I think the law needs to change. These activist judges wouldn't be able to make the decisions they're making if the law wasn't allowing them to.
And they also common purpose as well.
The law, yeah, quite, yeah. But the law needs the legislation itself is at fault there. In fact, it's the Human Rights Act overwhelmingly that's at fault there. It absolutely has to go. It has to be scrapped. And I think even on our leaflet, scrap the Human Rights Act may go down very well with a lot of people, because if it wasn't there, the judges wouldn't be able to use it to keep all sorts of rapists and terrorists in the country.
Replacing it with a Human Responsibilities Act.
I also think the law.
That's absolutely true, and I think any UK constitution should have responsibilities in it as well. Absolutely.
May I just say, because there's a big problem in this room with people understanding what the English constitution is.
But there isn't really
two
one.
things. First of all, in the English constitution, you qualify as a loyal citizen. That's under the Magna Carta. You can walk into any court on the level of a QC by writing to the court first a very polite notice, courtesy notice is what it's called. I am, in my case, Stephen of the Ward Family Sovereign. I'm coming here to make law. I'm defending the Queen. I'm defending the Crown. You are then, in effect, a knight, literally. People don't use this. I've used it. I've walked out of court several times. They don't touch me. The police will not arrest me because they know I'll be able to go back straight away and beat them. I can't afford to go through the Royal Court and spend 10,000 and another 100,000 fighting the paperwork. Excuse me a moment. But you can win it. Now that's the Constitution and we have it. It's one sentence and it's all you need. You don't need the rest. Getting back to the judiciary, they're taking advantage of the fact we don't know. That we don't know how to argue our case. The Arbitration Act, which is what's let these tribunals in for the other lot and all of that, that shouldn't even be in place. The Equalities Act, that's Michael Foster.
The Equalities Act has to go as well.
It should have gone 10 years ago. What judiciary let that act in? Who are these people? Because
well, the judiciary has no choice but to let an act in. The act is up to Parliament.
I would disagree.
No, it's not. Legally, constitutionally, the judges cannot overrule Parliament.
The European get-outs, because that's down to the judiciary as well as the House of Lords. They were against it in the first place. The judiciary have the duties to be mid-ground, defending everybody. And the government has been putting things in which plainly are having an adverse effect on the rest of everybody else. Housing, the whole thing, everything, the price of food, the whole thing can be, you can look at the judiciary and say, why are you quiet about this? And they're quiet because, and just the thing about the English Constitution, if you read Baggy Hop, it's about 2,000 pages. We need two houses. To say, oh, we'll get rid of the House of Lords, it's stupid. The problem with the House of Lords is for 20 years they've been stacking it full of their people.
Yeah, that's
Knowing
the
what
problem.
the plan is.
Which is why it's a problem. We do need
Yeah.
two houses, but it doesn't need to be the House of
But if you go and say we're going
Lords.
to pull it down, then you get resistance. If you're going to say we're going to, no, don't say what you're going to do. What Trump said, we're not going to tell you our plan. Let's just do it.
I'll come back to you, but does anyone else have any questions? I think that the man in the white shirt there, did you have your hand up for a bit? You. Hi. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry, that was a question from about half an hour ago. It was going back on the housing issue, that's how long that was. And there is a government fund at the moment, which has been in place. It's been in place for a number of years, with, I'm not sure if it's £1 or £2 billion in it, and it's invited local councils all around the country to come and take part of that fund, to use it for social housing, because councils own stacks of land. But you know, there's not one single council in the country that has actually kind of taken that on board. I've also been around, I'm a councillor myself.
That's very odd.
Yeah,
Why
I
would
know,
that be?
Very, very strange.
Why is that?
I've absolutely no idea at all. I mean, I'm in Maidstone, I'm a councillor on Maidstone Council. We've also, with a local developer who said that he was prepared to put something in place for, I think it was with Prudential, it was with Prudential, I'll talk now, of £3 billion worth on the same fund, whereby they will go around building social housing on council land. His criteria was for local people.
Yeah.
The council would be able to buy those properties, so they pay rent to pay the costs, etc. I think the building costs were £130 a square foot, so it was reasonable, yeah. And also that the council could actually buy that property back at the end of 40 years for £1, so it becomes council
This is the kind of thing I mean. This is the kind of arrangements we need to
property.
come
But
to.
you know what, those schemes are out there at the moment. So the likes of horrible Prudential are prepared to offer money to give them a little bit of, oh, look how wonderful we are. You know, we're not just taking people's pension monies, we're actually doing something for society. Massive PR stunt, we know that. But nobody anywhere.
Even so.
I've been round to I've been to Thurrock, I've been to Thanet, and I've been to Maidstone, and not one of those councils would take it on board.
I'd like to hear their reasons, but I have suspicions that it's just more inept local government, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, that's what it comes down to. And every local government has specific requirements for its area, and the local councillors need to be on the ball and know what's available, what they can do, what money they have, and get it done. And if they don't, you've got inept councillors.
Can I just say one other thing, and I promise I won't say another word on
That's all right.
There are a number of houses that are vacant, we know, all over the place. If you was to go out...
That's another one, yes, reclaiming.
London councils are bidding £5,000 to private landlords for those properties.
Great idea.
In Maidstone, they're actually bidding as well. But what they're doing is to take their homeless out of London, to place them down here, and they're going to give the local council here £5,000 per unit to take them on board, and then it'll be whatever the market rate is afterwards that the tenant has to pay. Or most of that they claim back from the government anyway.
Yeah.
So who owns the property after that?
Sorry?
Who owns the property?
Well, it's whoever the private landlord is. The private landlord, as long as he's getting his rent.
Oh, so he keep the owner.
Absolutely, yeah. So that is happening. That there was a development in the middle of Maidstone. This is all public knowledge. 40 flats, luxury flats. They only sold 4 of them. There was 44, and that went to, I think it was Redbridge Council that came along and took the other 40 and brought their people down, put them into the rest of the places, charged them X amount, and I would imagine those gold-plated taps were ripped out and sold somewhere or whatever. But this is what's happening. But again, it's driving it, and the majority of the people that are coming are immigrant people, because they tend to be at the lowest end. The poor people. It's single mums with 5 kids. But it's putting so much pressure on the local facilities. The schools. I mean, the schools are just full up. There's only one school in the whole of Maidstone that has actually got vacancies at junior level. One. And that's in a little village, you know, where their mums are never going to, they're not going to travel, a single mum's not going to travel across from one side of Maidstone to another as they would in Ashford here. But there's some major local issues that local people don't know anything about.
I mean, let me just break down a few of the basics of housing. I think housing is the primary, most important role of local government. Absolutely the most important role of government. National government's job in terms of housing is to make sure that the population coming in to a local government area is not overwhelming them. So it's national government's job to stop the numbers in the first place. It also has to provide resources. And, you know, local governments can come up with their own financing schemes. As I say, they're all specific to each other, but national government needs to make sure local government has the resources it needs and that it's not overwhelmed. And then finally, which you absolutely need, is competent councillors who have a priority in mind, and that priority will have to be to house their local people as financially expediently as they can. Those are the three basics of housing. If we can get those right, housing will not be the major problem that it is. But at the moment, all three of them are not happening. And if you know, as you say, if there's all this money available and local governments aren't taking it, this can only be inept counselling, inept councillors, that's it. But they also, you have a combination of inept councillors, oversupply of demand for housing and under-resources. All of that is what's happening at present now. All three have to change if we're going to bring the housing crisis under control. And that needs to be clear. I just want to say something about the UK Constitution and the English Constitution. Now, you're absolutely right. There are things in the Magna Carta that people can use. But one, they have to know that. Two, they have to have the sort of self-confidence. It's very difficult to get involved in legal issues. It is. It matters. And it can also cost a lot of money, which can be very intimidating. Bringing in a new UK constitution, it would have, first of all, it would have obviously have national coverage. It would be very clear, and we would base it on the Magna Carta, and we would make absolutely sure, and other documents, and make absolutely sure that everyone knows what their rights are. We need to update all of that. I don't think it's enough to sort of ask people to go back to the Magna Carta. We need to update, fresh, brand new, based on old British traditions, but brand new and fresh, and so everyone knows about it, and we have a new start in post-EU. I won't call it post-Brexit, post-EU Britain.
I think, may I just say, the point about the Magna Carta, because this is lost on people, it sets up a monarchistic government. Now, what this government and the previous one, and we're back to around about 87, has been trying to do is to get the monarchy side of it out and produce a kind of a state without a monarchy. It's to our advantage to have that, just like the two houses, to have them two separate cities. I know it's a bit of a bind to see these people living the high life and, you know, travelling about the world and all that, but they're not as dangerous as they used to be. But the system is a work of the system, and it keeps what we want. And I think we effectively all in this room want the same thing, and that is our genes to be around in 1,500 years' time. And not
1,500 years' time? Blimey, that's ambitious. I'm going for 50 years' time at this point. I'll be happy if we're there 50 years' time. Okay, I'll take one more from you, then I want to see if anyone else wants to talk about any other issues before we...
Going back to the law, is there a case for a national law service like the National Health Service where law is available to everyone regardless of how rich you are? Because at the moment, the law...
But there is legal aid.
But actually, if you're rich, you can pay for a better lawyer.
This is sadly how it is. I mean, the American way, where there is a public defender, and if you can't, you're offered when you're arrested. Obviously, if you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. We essentially do that here, but I think the legal aid system we have here is overly bureaucratic and overly cumbersome. Everything is, yeah. For democracy's sake, there absolutely has to be public legal defence. There has to be. Unfortunately, if we want to live in a free market, which we must, it's going to remain the case that if people have money, they can get a better lawyer. It also remains the case that if people have money, they can go private. We can't stop private medicine. We can't stop private lawyers because this is a free market economy. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. I suggest that perhaps a solution is to have better public lawyers. You know, but we absolutely must have public lawyers. But I also think that there has to be a limit on certain, you know, people are on appeals, for example, immigration. If you have people who are deported, the very rare time we get someone who is deported, they can spend years and years swallowing up public money on appeals. This we have to deal with. So I'm all for legal aid being available, absolutely, but we have to put some limits on it. And I think if people are going to appeal against deportation, for example, they can appeal from their own country and on their own pound. Sorry, I'll come down to you. Sorry, come on. Hi.
Yeah, what about referendum on the big issues? Where do you stand on that?
I'm in favour of it in general. It depends. The details are how big?
Bring it back, hang
How big and who decides? You would have to have. I think UKIP had quite a decent approach to this. Actually, you need to. You can't have a referendum every 5 minutes. You can't. You know, we have to be real. We have to get real. We have to run a country as well, and we can't be constantly bogged down in referendums and in admin. So it would have to be. I think UKIP's approach was quite good. Whereas if you can get 20% of the population to sign a petition asking for that referendum, then it should be considered. But you can't. I think you have to have a substantial number of people in the country who want it, or else you'll be having referendums every 5 minutes for everyone who wants a referendum on anything. I agree with it in principle, but I think as a starting point you would have to bring at least 20% of the electorate, of the voting electorate, asking for that referendum, or we'll be bogged down in them all day.
Yeah.
You've got to, you know, we've got to get real about admin as well. We do. You know, these things have to be. There's a pragmatism here. We're never going to solve everything. We're not going to solve every problem in the world. We're not going to solve every problem in the world. If the public want it, absolutely. But it would have to be a substantial number who want it and who are willing to say they want it before we can spend all that money, time, and resources on a referendum. But on principle, I do agree with that, but I think 20%. Well, it would have to be. I mean, the Parliament manages to have a formal petition service where if you get 100,000 signatures, they have to debate it in Parliament. We could do the same, and it's all done online, so it wouldn't cost a great deal. But you must have a substantial amount of people before you're going to spend all that money on a referendum. But yes, in principle, I do agree.
Having a super majority instead of a simple majority.
It's a debate, isn't it? It's a debate. I quite like simple majorities because they're simple. I like things to be simple. We get into this with, and this is another one you'll be voting on, is proportional representation. Should we campaign for proportional representation, or should we keep first past the post? I've gone back and forward on that one as well. Obviously, proportional representation is going to help smaller parties. But first past the post gives you a strong, well, usually, are supposed to, in theory, although the last couple of years have sort of disproven that, haven't they? It's supposed to give you a strong government with control of the House of Commons. And I like that idea. Yeah. And I like that idea because people vote for a party's manifesto. And if a party gets in, if a party gets most votes, and it then has to spend endless time negotiating with other parties and trying to come up with this and trying to come up with that, it just doesn't seem powerful. I want a powerful, strong government that can deliver everything that was on its manifesto, rather than getting bogged down in making deals with the people it's already defeated.
We'd end up like Italy, we'd be having new
well, this is it. It's constant, isn't it?
If we're going to replace the House of Lords, and I say replace rather than abolish, because I would say abolish it, and I voted on the referendum, the petition to abolish it, but we certainly need to have a bit like America, where we have Congress and we have a Senate, where perhaps the second elective chamber, whatever we care to call it rather than the House of Lords, is voted on proportionate representation there. So we then have a broader consensus within the second debating chamber rather than it being all one party. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there, it's just an idea.
It's an interesting idea. It might be difficult to balance up with a first past the post Commons.
We do away with political appointees to the Lords to begin with.
You end up with cohabitation.
You see, my big fear about an elected House of Lords is that it will turn into another House of Commons. Exactly. And you'll have a house full of professional politicians who, like the House of Commons, spend their lives immersed in party politics. They get into Parliament because they've been a member of the local party for years and they know all the right people in the local party. And they've spent their lives, possibly since childhood, just swimming in a party culture. They know very little beyond. One of the things I like about the House of Lords is that the people who are in there often have vast experience in other areas. You have big successful business people, for example, or successful lawyers, QCs, or people like Baroness Cox who fought communism for years. And they bring something other than party politics to the table, and that's why I like them. And that's one of the things I'm worried about giving up by having a second elected chamber. There's no easy answer to this. Definitely, it needs to be cut down enormously. It's big, it's cumbersome, it's expensive. It needs to change. But I like I said, I suspect the party will disagree with me on this, and will want an elected second chamber. But I'm worried about ending up with a second House of Commons filled with professional politicians whose every waking moment is about votes. And then what happens when you have a politician whose every waking moment is about votes is that they try to please everybody. They end up taking no firm position on anything, and you have yet another chamber then of these are my principles, and if you don't like them, I have others. This is what we have, and the Tories and Labour, and actually across the board, are trying to be the friend to everyone because they think that's what they have to do, and actually they end up taking no position on anything. We end up with a mundane, boring, dull, unprincipled politics. People are voting them in because there's no one else to vote for, and we've always voted for them, and then they just accept this elite which thinks they own. You see it in local government. They don't even bother to campaign sometimes. Such is their arrogance. And unfortunately, they get away with it. They get away with it. They have little fiefdoms. Loads of little deals they've got going on with local businesses and specifically local mosques, for example. Planning, brown envelopes for planning applications. They've got it all. They've been sitting on it for years and no one can touch them. No one does touch them. But we need to vote them out. And we have to start at local government level. We need to start booting them out. Because at the moment they see themselves as untouchable. They see it as a contest between Labour and the Tories. And there's a lot of people, including the mainstream media, with a vast vested interest in the status quo. That's the status quo we need to start chipping away at. And I don't think it'll be as difficult as people think. We've got a huge audience out there just waiting. And the media is another one. There's millions of people absolutely detest the mainstream media. They loathe it. They loathe these smug journalists. You can tell by that. Remember that Jordan Peterson interview with Cathy Newman?
That was great.
How this was so popular. People absolutely loved it. People who'd never heard of Jordan Peterson before in their lives saw this guy actually taking on this smug know-it-all journalist and winning. And people loved it. If you get more of that going, politicians are afraid of the media because the media controls the narrative, and the politicians think, well, I better not say this or I better not do that because this press this paper will describe it this way. It's a facade. It's a facade. They've all got this little system going, and they all drink in the same wine bars as well. The journalists and the politicians, they all drink in the same expensive wine bars in London. They think they're untouchable, and these little people like us who dare to push our way through, they don't like it. They don't like it. But every so often, the status quo changes. And it changed 100 years ago or so when Labour came along and really shook, and under first past the post system went into government. And it is, and I'll tell you, history is made in living rooms. History is made by a small group of determined people who sit down and think, we've had enough of this, we've had enough of the status quo. And every so often it works, and every so often massive change happens. And I think we're on the precipice now. We're either going to go off a cliff or we're going to pull ourselves back. And I think we're going to pull ourselves back. And I honestly believe that this is the party to do it. I really do. I do. Thank you. Any last question about anything else? I've loved this evening, by the way. Thank you. I love these chats. Okay.
Yes, I was just wondering what your opinions are on climate change and stuff, because there's a lot of debate over that, and some of the populist parties in America, they Republicans and stuff, they say it's a hoax and stuff. But I'm not really sure. I was just wondering what your opinions and policies would be on like the Paris Agreement and things like that. So I was just on carbon feud.
I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination. But I will say one thing: when the entire leftist establishment, and I include the Conservatives in that, when the entire leftist establishment agrees on something, I'm always suspicious of it. I'm always suspicious of it. I think there is certainly evidence. The seasons have certainly changed, even since I was a kid. But I'm persuaded that doesn't weather just change? Doesn't weather just change? Hasn't weather always changed? However, that aside, in terms of climate change, if this is real and we are going to tackle it, then it's going to have to make a global response. It's going to take a global response. You're going to have to get the whole world to agree on what to do from a global perspective. There is absolutely no point or reason for us to be applying oppressive green taxes on everybody in this country, so that energy is so expensive that we end up in a situation where British pensioners are having to choose between heating and eating. Meanwhile, China, the US, other massive countries are spewing out the gases, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing this tiny country can do about global warming. And what we are doing is punishing our own pensioners for something while China continues to pollute. It's an obscenity. It's an obscenity. I will not have it, climate change or otherwise, I will not have it that British pensioners are sitting in the cold all winter because their energy is too high because of green taxes. I will not have that. And the British people come first. We can deal with climate change on a global level, and we will play our part, but we will not have these taxes putting our pensioners into the cold. That's how I feel.
Totally agree.
Anything else?
Hi. It's just a question about what's your take on the Barcelona Treaty, and what would you do in order to negate its negative effects?
Barcelona?
Well, we negate it at home, simply with the policies that we already have. I'll explain. Do you want to explain the Barcelona Agreement? Yeah. This is it's one of many, actually. And if you read the book Eurabia by Batyor, an incredible book, and she gives detail, she gives documents, EU documents. In other words, proof. This is not a fantasy. This is all real, and it's happening in the open. It's happening in the open, and yet people don't seem to know about it. But basically, agreements have been made between the European Union and various Muslim states, trade agreements, which include open borders to the Muslim world, and a respect for Islam within Europe. In other words, the promotion of Islamic culture within Europe was agreed between the European Union and Muslim countries several times. Barcelona is only just one of them. But Barcelona put a date of 2010 on it. And you'll notice that the big mass migration happened very quickly. Merkel opened those borders like that. And I think that was partly because there was a shift in public. They were doing it slowly. They've been doing it slowly for years. But with the rise of people like the AfD or Pegida even, there was very much a show of disapproval. And I think there was awakening all over Europe. And that's why I think they thought, open the borders, it needs to be faster. Yeah. It needs to be faster.
And it's Brexit, don't you?
What's that?
It's gone off since Brexit as well.
It has. They know we're waking up. Yeah. And they need to up the ante. And watch this summer. Watch this summer. There's going to be hundreds of thousands as well. Yeah. And even now, the newspapers don't say so, but thousands every day are still coming in.
The media have got to stand on the side of the mass immigration. They've got it's in the document. It says so. The media must assist with this. I mean, this is. You have to excuse me because it makes me absolutely furious that we've been we have all been completely sold out by this document. So I'm only familiar with the 2010, but the various different politicians around Europe have sold us out completely. They've ordered our media to put a positive spin on the mass invasion, which is what it is in the day. The refugees should have stopped at Italy or Greece. Then there'd be refugees. They're not refugees when they pass through 7 countries. It's an invasion.
Well, they're not actually. They're not refugees if they're not coming from. They're not if they're not coming from a country that there's not anything to flee from. We've redefined refugee as economic migrant. If your country is poor, you apparently apply as asylum seeker. So there's not even any definition of refugee or asylum seeker being used anymore. It's an open border. It's an invite to the world, and they wanted to destabilise us.
What is for Britain's take on it? What would you suggest is done about it? What can you do about it if you get enough?
About the Barcelona Agreement? Well, we just make it redundant. If we put in our policies about immigration and bringing down the EU and stabilising our borders and deporting people who ought not to be here, it makes the whole thing redundant anyway. If we reintroduce British culture into Britain, we anglicise the public space, if we teach children pro-British, or at least some pride, hang the flag here and there, teach children a bit about what Britain has contributed to the world. If we change all of that, if we do all of that, then the Barcelona Agreement won't matter anyway.
Is it related to access to oil?
Remember Hubbard here.
What's that?
The Barcelona Agreement, is it related to access to oil?
Some oil countries, but not all. Not all. Trade and immigration. The EU wants mass migration. The EU wants to weaken Europeans, native Europeans. It wants to weaken them. It's been doing so for years. To weaken identity, to, of course, over the resources, the taxation to pay for all of this is, of course, coming from the downtrodden 9-to-5 worker who is ending up with their own standard of living dropping because they're going to have to pay. I mean, you see it in Sweden. Pensioners are going without in order to pay for migrants. They're even putting migrants in with pensioners. They're seizing. In Italy, there was a series of seizing second homes, so seizing private property. It's essentially communism, imposing itself via mass migration. Mass migration gives it the excuse, but it's imposing public, it's taking away private ownership is another aspect of this. And it's just the ever-encroaching state. And it's using mass migration to increase its own power.
The big pricing.
It's related to a lot of things. There are always a million different factors to this. But the effect and intent, overall intent, I believe, is to weaken European identity, to weaken the European peoples, in order to impose a European superstate on us. They're not shy. They're not shy about this, and they've been talking about the European superstate since the foundations of it. Since it was just a coal and steel agreement between the 6 countries. They were talking about united Europe even then, and they weren't shy about it. They even talked about the fact that we'll have to hide it from the public. Don't tell them that this is our intention. We'll do it gradually. They openly said this stuff. And still, if you say it, if people like me say this, we'll be called cranks. And, they're crazy right-wing nut jobs, I think is the term. No, it's all absolutely, but they are all in the public eye. They're all in the public eye.
But who knows about them until this sort of thing starts kicking off, and then you start researching for yourself. But I'm still amazed at how many people have never heard of them.
Well, they're not going to teach it in school. That much I know. And that the media doesn't talk about it. If anyone does talk about it, it's either ignored or they're dismissed as a right-wing nut job. That's why nobody knows. So it's our job to make sure they do know. That's what this is. But we have a big job to do.
Absolutely.
Very big job to do.
If we had a policy of mass electrification of cars, of private transport, then that would reduce our dependency on oil.
I really want to reduce our dependency on oil. I would energy full stop is a huge issue. I want us to have a target of moving away from oil, and if it means coal, if it means nuclear, we need to start looking at any which way we can get the energy we need with the British people's interests as paramount, and with the aim of moving away from oil dependency, because our dependency on oil is a large reason why we bow down in obedience to Saudi Arabia and others.
Exactly, but our power stations are gas power. Our power stations are run on Russian gas rather than Saudi oil. So it's actually the cars that run on Saudi oil.
There are many different factors to it. We can't solve all this overnight. But what we have to do is aim. And every step, if you have an aim to get away from oil, every step you make in that direction is getting you away from oil. We're not going to end oil overnight, but we can make steps to move away from it. And to do that, we have to announce that our priority is to move away from oil and dependency on foreign energy, full stop. Not just oil, but as you say, gas from Russia. Move away from dependency on foreign import. And to be honest, our energy, the fact that we are switching on of the lights, the very functioning of our society, the fact that it depends so much on imports worries me. Especially when we have the capability to drum up at least most of our energy at home, and we need to. And if we did, we might create a few jobs along the way as well, a few jobs for British people along the way, and save ourselves some money. Right, it's 9:30. I'm going to have to stop there. I'll hang around for a cup. Do you mind if we have another cup of coffee, or do you want to? Are you sure? I don't want to hijack your premise. Thank you ever so much, by the way, for allowing us to come here this evening, and thank you all for coming. And I hope you found it helpful. Annie, again, thanks for a lovely evening.